I don't suppose those who are interested in these kind of matters, like a Malcolm Gladwell type, try and look at host cities and deduce that we're all very suggestible and Super Bowls can in some ways take on the characteristics of a host city. Does that ever tend to happen? Anyone flout that theory down the years?
I've never seen it. Because you could argue that in terms of like indolence and later Roman Empire kind of stuff, New Orleans would be the best place for that. The last time I did a Super Bowl in New Orleans, literally, Mark Chapman and I arrived on the Friday on a long string of flights to get to New Orleans because it's not the biggest city in America. It doesn't have the most kind of air travel. And he got picked up and taken to join the rest of the BBC crew down in the French Quarter, and I had to rent a car and go to Metairie. And Metairie is one of the lesser the lesser indolent places. Although it's right, I was right below the Huey Long Bridge, so on Sunday morning to prepare for the game, I could take a nice long walk in Bayou Coquille across the Mississippi River, and it was beautiful, sunny, warm day in New Orleans. So I think it's a great place to have it. The stadium itself, the Superdome, doesn't have all that much character, but nowadays most of the stadia don't have that much character. And it's right in the middle. It's right downtown. So, most of the people there can walk out to the game, which is another big plus.
This is a very interesting dynamic on a few fronts. Obviously, Eagles looking for revenge from 2 years ago in what was a very close game between Chiefs and Eagles. And then I guess that the Chiefs are taking centre stage. Their dynasty, very American term, you love dynasties. So they are looking for an unprecedented 3 in a row. I was surprised just somewhere along the way that it is unprecedented. 3 in a row, just super difficult.
Yeah, I mean, the first two Super Bowls were won by the Green Bay Packers, and they had won the NFL championship the year before, but the other league, the AFL, existed at the time. So otherwise, they're kind of halfway qualifier for it. But yeah, it's a very, very difficult thing to do given the extent of the playoffs, the number of rounds, and that each game is a one-off. It's a knockout game, and injuries and the modern pressures of salary cap. You build a big star. You can be forced to lose him. And Kansas City's a great example of that because Andy Reid won the Super Bowl against San Francisco. The big star of the game, besides Patrick Mahomes, as usual, was Tyreek Hill. Made a long downfield catch, which was sort of the turning point in that game. And then Hill needed too much money, and they got rid of him. They traded him down to Miami. And for each of the past 3 years, the question has been, how does Andy replace Tyreek Hill with other receivers? They've never had, in that time, one big receiver who stepped up and filled that gap. So he's filled it by changing his offense to some extent, becoming more Travis Kelce friendly, the tight end, and using a variety of guys in different roles, sometimes very limited roles. But last year the winning touchdown was caught by Kadarius Toney out of nowhere, in a sense. He's the last guy the defense looked at to cover, and I think it's a sign of Andy Reid's real coaching acumen. And one of the big stories of this is, does Andy Reid join the pantheon of coaches? And I think he probably already has joined it, in my mind.
Yes, Reid as coach and Mahomes as quarterback, looking for a fourth in 6 years, which
right
does sound very impressive. I have been watching a little bit of American TV over the last 24, 48 hours in anticipation of talking to you.
Yeah. Avoid the news channels.
Well, as a rule. But I'm watching the sports shows. The discussion about Mahomes and whether or not he will become the GOAT, the greatest of all time quarterback, I'm kind of stunned at how inane and reductive the conversation is. Now, it's not to say like the American media landscape, I'm sure the podcast realm may be slightly different and you'd have a good sense of things. But genuinely, the television debates are as reductive as, if he wins, he's the GOAT. If he loses, then not for me. And this is in a team sport where he is reliant on his teammates to catch the ball and to block and defend and make tackles and
to play.
Yeah, you know, if this was an individual sport, if they were, you know, if Tiger Woods was going out to beat Nicklaus's major haul, I would have a touch more acceptance for that kind of analysis. But I've tuned into several TV debates for is Mahomes the greatest? And instead of comparing various aspects of his game with Brady's, for instance, it is just honestly that inane. I was kind of thinking, God, this can't pass the mustard on American TV.
No, it's. I mean, if you've ever read Neil Postman's book, Amusing Ourselves to Death, he predicted all of this back in 1985, and basically, volume and entertainment trumps information as far as these things are concerned, and everybody simply jumps on the same meme and rides it to death in various ways. I think, as you implied at the beginning, Mahomes' status as one of the greats is already, I think, established, not just by the wins, but his presence in the continued success in each of his years as a starter, which is not to be demeaned. You know, making a Super Bowl is an achievement in itself. And the guys who lost, like Jim Kelly in Buffalo, who lost 4 consecutive Super Bowls, it doesn't demean his skills as a quarterback to have got there and lost, because it is a team game. And when you look back at the other candidates for the greatest quarterback of all time, I'm reluctant to ever say the greatest player of all time, because yes, quarterback, I don't think there's a position that's more important in a team sport than quarterback. An ice hockey team can ride a hot goalie to success, but it's not, in the overall scheme of things, the most controlling thing the way a quarterback is. So when you look at the ones who are normally in the GOAT conversations, you have Tom Brady, obviously. 7 Super Bowl wins, consistent success over a period of 20 years with 2 different teams. You have Joe Montana with the Super Bowl run in San Francisco with 2 different coaches, although the same basic system. And he had 4 Super Bowl wins. You have some people talk about Otto Graham in both the All-American Football Conference in the 1940s and then the NFL in the 1950s, 10 seasons, 10 championship games, 6 wins. People don't often talk about Terry Bradshaw, who won 4 Super Bowls with the Steelers in that kind of way. They have sort of stopped talking about John Unitas, who was sort of considered the GOAT in the 60s when he was at his peak and had a couple of championships with Baltimore. And I think that's the interesting thing, because all of those 4 who are generally in that major conversation are an amalgam of great coaches and great quarterbacks. Brady and Belichick, Otto Graham and Paul Brown, Montana and Bill Walsh, and now Andy Reid and Mahomes. And I think they come, and people will make the argument in the past few years that Belichick would be nothing without Brady, and Brady himself was sort of saying, not quite, it's almost the opposite. Bill and I were a great pair. And I think the same is true of Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes. And part of it is recognizing the talent you have and building your team to him, or you can argue in Walsh's case, building the quarterback to the system he wanted to play. And they were a perfect fit that way. Yeah. But in that sense, I think Mahomes is easily in that top 4 or 5.
For sure. And it's a very interesting...
And he's got half of his career to come.
Well, indeed. And it's a really interesting conversation to have, which is why I guess I was just so disappointed the last few days when I tuned into different shows. Like I was watching First Things First, that show that's yeah. So I don't know the guy's name, but so there were, Mahomes to be the best, etc. And the logic he said was, well, if he gets to 5, that will, for me, mean he's better than Brady, who has 7, because of his superior numbers. But then he qualified by saying, although his numbers have slowed down a little bit, but that can be balanced out by the three-peat. And I just thought, what is this weird
Yeah, and
mathematical, like made up? We would if you were sitting in the media over here debating Messi or Ronaldo, who's the best, and you started talking about what they had won in a team game as the arbiter, like that, it just wouldn't. It would be unacceptably stupid.
It's hard to make, and over here as well, numbers don't have quite the same. There isn't the depth of statistical analysis, and American football, you know, is now with Pro Football Focus and things like that. Everything is quantified to some extent.
Yeah.
And the argument that Mahomes' numbers are down is actually a positive argument for his strength as a quarterback, and his leadership ability, his ability to get the job done when it has to. And this year's Chiefs have actually been a defensive-oriented team. The defense hasn't had the luxury of being able to, say, blitz the other team's quarterback because they have a big lead and they know the other team is going to be forced to pass. Which gives your pass rushers a big advantage. They've really had to tough out victories, and to me, that quality is as important as anything else. And that was Tom Brady was Bill Belichick's quarterback, but in the time he played for Belichick, they were 3 or 4 different teams. They were a defensive first team that needed Brady to they didn't have big star receivers. They needed Brady to kind of control the ball up the field the way the Chiefs are playing this year. Long drives with no mistakes. They don't turn the ball over very much this season. Then they were a pass crazy team like the Chiefs were with Tyreek Hill, with Randy Moss, and then with Rob Gronkowski at tight end, and Brady was throwing the ball long, and then they changed again to a kind of wide open spread offense in the teens, and I think that kind of ability is exactly what you see in Patrick Mahomes. He could play in any kind of a system.
Right.
He could probably play in any kind of an era. And the difference, the similarity with him and Brady is they see things before the play, which is one mark of a good quarterback. The second one is they anticipate how the play is going to come out and can put the ball to a receiver without seeing that he's open. That's the hugest difference in American football quarterbacks. Some quarterbacks have to wait to see the receiver open and then throw. Some quarterbacks will anticipate the receiver being open, where he's going to go and put the ball there and expect the receiver to get to it. The third thing that Mahomes adds is that mobility. And it's not just running ability, it's the ability to move and see the whole field while he's moving, throw against his movement, against the way his body's going. It's really spectacular. And I think that sort of thing, there are other quarterbacks who can do some of those things. There are very few who can do all of them. And I think that's the kind of argument that you can say, well, I think Mahomes is the greatest of all time.
Yes,
but
okay.
It's only 6 or 7 years, so maybe he needs to play another couple of years with some success to cement that as a fact.
And to be fair, that's where you get into, there is a distinction between who had the greatest career and who was the best player on their best day.
Peak value versus career value.
And so career value, we can't really have that full debate yet between Mahomes and the rest, but on their best day, if you take it that Mahomes is at his peak or somewhere near his peak, you seem to be straddling slightly over towards he's a more complete quarterback than Brady, or where are you?
I think he adds a dimension that Tom didn't have. And that's that mobility dimension. I say sometimes he reminds me of a point guard in basketball back in the days when the game. So there was a guy called Walt Frazier with the New York Knicks who usually was fairly slow, bringing the ball up, that kind of thing. But it was as if the game were in slow motion for him, and he could see everything, and he seemed to have peripheral vision. And I think great players, obviously, they'll often say, as they get more experience, the game slows down for them. I think great players operate with a metabolism that makes everything around them seem slower, so they have more time to process and think. And I think that's what Mahomes does. And I think at peak value, he's probably up there with anybody right
Mm.
now. Um, I think that's, it's inarguable to me.
So the Chiefs evolving in the absence of Tyreek Hill. Obviously, there was nothing between these two when they did meet in the Super Bowl a couple of years ago now. Um, is your sense that the Chiefs are a lesser team and they're making do, and it's that more Travis Kelce friendly approach, or when it comes down to it, could they be every bit as effective as they were?
I think that they're probably a lesser balanced team. Um, but defensively, they have been very, very good this year. I think Philadelphia offensively and player for player probably is a better team when you look at it that way. Although Philadelphia's star players, there's no real depth behind them, especially at receiver. The Eagles don't have an AJ Brown or a Devontae Smith, but they've got a bunch of guys who fit in really well with what they want to do. In um, in 2017, I picked New England over the Eagles, but I said I thought the Eagles had the better team, top to bottom, than New England did. But I wasn't going to go against Tom Brady, especially when he was playing a backup quarterback in Nick Foles, who turned out to have a really great game and stunned everybody. The last couple of years, I've picked Kansas City against Philadelphia because I thought they were the better team 2 years ago, and better team than San Francisco. And this year, I think Philadelphia is the better team. So again, which way you go probably depends on your faith in Mahomes and how much you expect him to carry the game. There was an interesting stat I saw. Now I contradict myself by using stats, but in Super Bowls, when they're down by 10 points or more, Mahomes has actually won 3 and lost 1. And all the other quarterbacks who've been in that position in Super Bowls have won 4 and lost 48. And I expect this to be a close game, just like the last time they played was. And in that kind of thing, it's like, okay, well, do you trust Mahomes to kind of will the team to victory? If there will be nobody in the stadium who, if the Eagles are leading by 3 points with a minute and a half to go and Kansas City get the ball back, who will doubt that Kansas City will at least tie the game.
Yeah.
Well, and that's because of Mahomes.
Yes. Mahomes and this kind of, I guess justified residual belief that when it comes to crunch time, Kansas have the psychology and the experience and the know-how and a certain maybe aura now built up, which is no small thing when you are in those moments.
Yeah. And, people talk about the Kansas City cheats and the referees giving them an advantage and stuff. And the only element of truth I really think is that as a veteran superstar, Mahomes gets the benefit of some calls the way that veteran superstars do in most sports.
Yeah.
If you're up against the rookie and the rookie's, you're kind of pushing him away or something, the referee's not going to give the rookie the benefit of the doubt. But when you're a superstar, you sort of get that. You get a certain amount of respect that in any individual situation is not really deserved, but it's a cumulative sort of thing.
Yeah. Do you see the Eagles as a great team? They deserve a Super Bowl?
Yes. I think for a couple of reasons. One is that they've built a really good team and rebuilt it. The general manager, Howie Roseman, has done a really good job of that. They made a big decision a couple of years ago to stick with Jalen Hurts as their quarterback, who was a second-round draft pick, who hadn't been that impressive as a rookie. And people concentrated on his shortcomings. They did in college too, rather than his obvious strengths. And so they built a team around him. 2 years ago, they got AJ Brown, who is the kind of receiver that a quarterback who doesn't necessarily see things the way that Mahomes does, which is what the category Hurts is in, can really benefit from, because he's a big target. He's hard to dislodge from the ball. He's got good speed. He can go deep as well as crossing across. And then this year, of course, they picked up Saquon Barkley. And that was sort of the ingredient that they needed for a team that was perfectly designed to run the ball, but needed a back who could really be a home run threat. They led the league in big plays this year, and a lot of them were running plays. They were last in passing because they don't throw that much, not because they can't throw, but because they just chose not to. And that creates an interesting dynamic because I think if Hurts is healthy, he's been nursing a bad leg through the playoffs, but he's had a week off now, an extra week. If Hurts is fully healthy, his running game depends on Barkley. They'll run him on his own in the opposite direction of Barkley, hoping that the defense is going that way. And if Barkley can make a couple of big plays the way he did in the conference championship game, it's going to put Kansas City in a problem because when they want to pressure a quarterback, they blitz. Steve Spagnuolo, the defensive coordinator, is one of the great defensive coordinators for game planning. But if you blitz, it means you're pretty much covering man-to-man behind the blitzers. You have to bring extra men to rush the quarterback. And that's when you can give up explosive plays. And Hurts' biggest strength as a passer is the long pass. He's been good at that. And they'll take shots at it, even if they don't come through. So that's one of the more interesting matchups. And Kansas City, who have a good offensive line themselves, but they're dealing with the best offensive line in football. Probably 3 Pro Bowl players, best all-star players in of the 5. And when they run Barkley, they'll tend to block down with those guys. And that leaves the guy on the edge, the defender who's supposed to set the edge, alone with Barkley. And Barkley can beat him, once every 6 plays or whatever. And once Barkley beats him, he's out in space, and he's got a combination of speed and moves that makes him very hard to bring down in space. So, it'll be interesting to see how they work that. And one of the things is they've always had big lines. And even in the Andy Reid days in Philadelphia, their line was generally a big line. These guys are really huge. The left tackle is Jordan Mailata, who was a rugby league player in Australia, but he was really too big for rugby league in a sense, and he's now at like 6'8" and about 330 pounds or something like that. But he's got quick feet, which is what they saw in him and liked. His really quick feet. And there was a play in the conference championship where he basically threw a block, knocked over A.J. Brown, who was trying to block somebody, and the guy Brown was blocking, and the 2 guys who were chasing up. So it was basically 3 opponents plus your teammate. And then he ran downfield and caught Barkley as he was pretty much crossing the goal line. And then, was celebrating, and then came over to the sidelines. They caught it on camera and microphone, apologizing to A.J. Brown for just taking him out of the play. And it's that kind of thing that I think makes the Eagles a real threat, even against a good defense, which is what the Chiefs have.
Okay, really nicely set up. One last thing I just wanted to get your thoughts on. I don't suspect any super successful franchise is beloved by America generally. Maybe there's an exception to that. I didn't get the impression the Patriots were beloved by the masses as the years went by.
That's fair to say.
Yeah. And Mahomes, you mentioned the protection and the preference he gets as a superstar from the referees, and there is no doubt he's prone to a flop, as you guys call it over there. He'll go down, no problem. And I think as well, the media and the television directors have gorged on the Taylor Swift, Travis Kelce thing too.
You'll probably see more cutaways to Taylor Swift in the crowd than you will to Donald Trump.
Yes,
which is no problem for me, basically.
And people have kind of just, oh my God, enough of this already. So this great dynasty, are they popular-ish or
they're
not
popular-ish?
So much?
I mean, what you're saying is correct. They're starting to get criticism. The referees' favoritism, the Taylor Swift saga with Travis Kelce, Jason Kelce, and Travis now are omnipresent everywhere. Although, got to say, I love Kylie Kelce. Jason's wife is like the perfect wife. He was when they went up to Buffalo to watch the Chiefs lose to Buffalo during the regular season. They asked her, what she how she felt or how her husband had enjoyed. So I feel so sorry for Jason. He wanted to go out in the tailgating with the Bills fans and jump through a table, but nobody had a table for him to jump through. And I'm thought that's the best wife in the world. She's sad because her husband doesn't get to get drunk and jump through a table. What more could a man want? I, I don't, I don't need a list. Don't send them in, folks. But yeah, I think Philadelphia is a hard team to love because Eagles fans are rather on the obnoxious side. Also on the very short-term satisfaction side.
Okay.
When they beat the Patriots in the Super Bowl the next season, their first game was against Atlanta. They failed on a play at the goal line. Atlanta scored. They were down at the end of the first quarter, I think 14-3 or something, and the fans were booing them. It's like, what have you done for us lately? And I find that kind of objectionable. But 100 and whatever it is, 25 million people are going to watch it, and probably a few more at halftime. And one thing, going right back to the beginning about New Orleans, the NFL has constructed the halftime show and the pregame music, and the game is the Super Bowl is half football and half variety show.
Sure.
But the pregame, it's all New Orleans oriented. All the artists, are either from or have real connections to New Orleans. And I discovered two things yesterday when I was doing the research. And one was that Trombone Shorty is going to be singing or playing America the Beautiful with someone called Lauren Daigle, they're both from New Orleans. I like Trombone Shorty a lot. And also I discovered that SZA is actually pronounced Scissors. Which this is why people don't bring me in to critique the entertainment at the Super Bowl.
I think it's good though. It's nice to have a bit of hometown flavor because all these stadiums are increasingly homogenous.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you can't highlight music out of New Orleans, then what can you do? Back in the old days, I think the very first Super Bowl, maybe the first two, Al Hirt, who was a Dixieland trumpeter, was the main Super Bowl attraction. We've come a long way since then.
Yeah. Was the halftime show in place for the first Super Bowl?
There was always a halftime show, but it was mainly marching bands. But they added, for example, Al Hirt, and then a couple of years later, it was like the Up With People singers, the ones who did like I'd like to teach the world to drink a Coke and that kind of stuff. And there wasn't the hubbub about commercials at that point because they weren't such a big thing. I mean, Budweiser released their Super Bowl commercial like a week ago. It's very good if you like, kind of sloshy sentiment with horses, but who doesn't?
Who is Mike Carlson tipping?
Oh, that's such a tough one. I've gone both ways. I keep seeing people put up crazy probability things like the team that travels west has generally beaten the team that travels east. The last 30 Super Bowls, that's applied. Although I don't think the Chiefs will be suffering. No one's suffering from any jet lag in a game where you arrive a week before the game. So I'm not quite sure why that is. But I think I've gone with the Chiefs and Travis and Patrick Mahomes because I thought they were the better team the last 2 years. I didn't go for them when they lost to Tampa because Tampa were obviously going to be better because the Chiefs their strength was pass rushing the edges, and both Chiefs starting tackles were out from that game. So you could see Mahomes was going to be in a lot of trouble. But I still regret picking the Patriots over the Eagles when I thought the Eagles had the better team, but the Patriots had the better quarterback. So I'm going to give the Eagles a break. The Eagles.
Yeah.
The Eagles a break and go with the Eagles.
Well, I guess history's on your side. It's an amazing thing that 3 in a row has never happened. So
yeah, and like I say, I think it'll be a good game. I think it'll be a close game. So if you wanted to take either team to win by less than 10 points or something like that, it's kind of a better bet, a better paying bet, with the team that you like.
And so if he loses,
my only regrets I'm not there.
Yeah, for sure, no doubt. If he loses, then I can watch American TV tell me, well, this is why Mahomes is not the GOAT.
If you really want to suffer on Monday morning, put a little cotton buds in your ear.
Yeah, turn off my brain
to lessen the volume.
Yeah. Okay, sounds like it's going to be a good one. Mike, thank you so much. Great to talk to you.
It's always a pleasure, Joe. Thanks.